Hello, welcome back to my channel. And welcome to another car wrap-up. I'm so excited to be telling you all about the books that I read in the month of March. I read 20 books in March, and I'm going to be talking about 14 of them in this video. The rest you can find in vlogs on my channel, and it has been a mixed bag. We've had some really incredible reads and some real freaking stinkers. Some of my first one-star books of the year. So excited to tell you all about them, but before I do that, I wanted to thank the sponsor of today's video and tell you a little bit about nurx. Nurx is a digital healthcare platform that makes it easy to get the expert healthcare you deserve. They provide treatment and care that's personalized so you can make informed choices about your health. They're tailored to your unique health history and goals. nurx offers more than 50 clinically proven, dermatologist-trusted treatments for acne, melasma, and anti-aging that work faster and are more effective than over-the-counter products. As you may know, I'm on a journey to conceive my first child, so I'm not personally using any prescription skincare at the moment. I love that when I'm ready to jump back in and really start improving my skin again, I can turn to nurx and their licensed medical providers to tackle my skin concerns. Which is perfect because in the past, I've had issues trying to get appointments with other medical providers in the past. I just feel like I am always having to wait months and months to actually receive the care that I need. But with nurx, you can get a medical consultation anytime and get connected with a provider that's licensed in your state that can review your history and, if medically appropriate, prescribe a treatment for you. You, of course, get a personalized treatment plan with nurx, and you get a full year of unlimited messaging. So if you ever have any questions, you can reach out to their dermatology expert providers and their care team. nurx understands that women's healthcare journeys are unique and they're ever-changing. Their care model provides comprehensive treatments so that women can continue to receive high-quality integrated care all in one place. Thanks again to nurx for sponsoring this video. Taking control of your health starts here. Go to nurx.com/chandler.ainsley or click the link in my description. That's nurx.com/chandler.ainsley. Not offered in every state. Medications prescribed only if clinically appropriate. Consultation required. Thanks again to nurx for sponsoring this portion of today's video. All right, now let's get into the wrap up, shall we? I read 20 books and I am going to be talking to you about 14 of those, which feels like a very large proportion. I feel like normally I'm only talking about half of the books that I read in a given month, but I was reading a lot over on my vlog channel and I feel like I just didn't read very much over here. So I've got a lot to share with you, some of which is going to feel a little bit random, like this first one, Divergent. I read this book for a video that I may or may not scrap. Essentially, the idea was that I was going to read 10 books from this Goodreads list for the best book boyfriends, and all the book boyfriends were pretty problematic. I'm gonna say, like, the top, I think the #1 book on that list is Beautiful Disaster. So I'm going to do this whole thing where I read the 10 books and discuss all of the boyfriends and which ones most deserve to go to jail based on their merits and or demerits. Divergent was one of the books on that list, okay? It was interesting revisiting this book almost a decade later and kind of figuring out if it really has lasting power, I guess, in a kind of broader sense. And I have to say, it kind of just feels like a Hunger Games ripoff, which is kind of what it is. I mean, I'm not saying that it copies everything that Hunger Games tries to do, and I obviously think that authors running with whatever is popular in a genre makes sense. Obviously, all of the, vampire books after Twilight came out, all of that makes sense to me, right? But this one just really didn't feel like it had a real uniqueness to it or really said a ton. I think the beauty of Hunger Games in particular is that not only does it have an interesting setup and premise that really keeps kids, young adults, and adults alike interested in the books, but it also has commentary and things to say on wealth, on greed, on society, that sort of thing. I don't know necessarily that Divergent has that same sort of messaging. It has this idea, right, that you have society broken up into the things that they value most, right? There's the erudites and there's the, I don't even remember all of the names of the different factions, but there's different factions, they value different things, and if you're a smarty, you go to the smart faction, and if you value peace and charity, you go to that faction, and there's obviously the Dauntless, who are the badasses, and that is where our heroine goes. She is in the kind of milquetoast, boring ass faction, decides to go to the one that is more exciting, and she meets this guy named Four, and she learns more about society. She learns she's different than everybody else, obviously, because she's a heroine in a YA novel. Of course she's gonna figure out she's different than everybody else. I will say the romantic relationship I did not find problematic at all, really. I felt like Four was actually someone who was really good at communicating with Triss, didn't really exhibit a lot of the gross alpha male behaviors and a lot of the other books on that list. But again, I just don't think this book has a true impact necessarily, or a real big cultural relevance. I mean, it's just one of the, I hate to say ripoffs of the era, but sort of. So yeah, I don't know. It was kind of fun revisiting it. I don't know that this is a book that I think everybody needs to rush out and read if you haven't read it already, but it exists. It is a thing that I read. So I think I rated it 3 stars. If I rated it at all, it was fine, but just nothing remarkable. remarkable. Something that was also fine and not remarkable, because I'm too stupid to understand it. Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. I DNF Station 11 back in the day, which is like her most popular book. Tell me why this one felt very fucking similar though. Like what was this? Okay, you've got a dude in the olden days, and he is kind of skipping around the Canadian wilderness. You've got a lady into the future who lives on the moon and is doing a book tour on Earth. And then you've got this like detective who I guess is sort of a contemporary of that woman, I believe, who lives on the moon. And he is trying to like figure some shit out. And you're realizing that all three of these characters are connected. And oh my God, like life is beautiful. I'm very over reading books about pandemics, I'm gonna say. I don't know why we need a second book by the same author about a pandemic. It's not something that I really connect with or vibe with or wanted to read more of. And I will be honest, I didn't really understand why the connection between these three was that important and what the message of this book was overall. I just think I don't connect with literary fiction hardly ever, because I think that the points that authors are trying to make are either way too in your face to the point that it's obnoxious, or way too vague to the point where I'm like, what did I just read? I don't care. I feel like they never really strike a middle ground for me, and I feel like I hate to make, complete generalizations, but yeah, just don't fuck with these books, okay? 2 stars. Moving on to a book that was actually pretty good, a romance. Indigo Ridge. This one's interesting. I didn't expect to like this book, I'm gonna be honest with you, because I am not really into books where the heroes or heroines are, what's the word I'm looking for? First responders, or in the military, or like cops. That's not really my thing, okay? Winslow, the main character of this book, is coming to town to become the police chief for this place that she's never lived. And so everybody is kind of up in arms that they've got this like kind of random woman coming and like being the police chief. Not only is she like a young woman and like kind of beautiful, but also like she doesn't live here and like, people don't trust her. So we've got her, and we've also got her love interest Griffin, who is this country guy who I believe she like meets at a bar the first night that she's there. I think they have a night of passion actually. And then she like realizes who he is later on, that sort of thing. And people keep showing up dead on his property, so they have to like keep coming into contact with each other. And essentially what this book is I was gonna say it's the romance between Winslow and Griffin, but I feel like that's an exaggeration. It's about these two fucking repeatedly, and then eventually being like, you know what if we just like shacked up, I know you got your own place and I got my place, but like it'd be cool if you stayed here and had your toothbrush here, since we're just boning all the time. I'm kind of over it. I'm kind of over the books that are like set up as a sensuous, like deep and meaningful romance and really are just about two people boning down frequently. I didn't feel like the romantic relationship development was there. I feel like a lot of the reveals about Winslow's past came a little too late to be impactful on the story. I don't know. It was just kind of meh for me. I gave this book 3 stars, I should say. So it was an improvement over Sea of Tranquility, but it was not exactly the banger that I was necessarily looking for, which I think is kind of just a running theme always, but gets especially bad for the next 2 books we're talking about, okay? The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. So this book's about our heroine, Mika Moon, and she is a real-life witch. There are not very many witches left in Britain, and for some reason they're not really allowed to be raised together or in contact with each other, so she's always lived a very isolated life. And to kind of share, I guess, the love that she has of being a witch, she gets on YouTube and, like, pretends to be a witch. Like, she's sharing her witchiness, but, like, kind of not lying about it, but, like, not necessarily passing it off as if she is a true witch. Anyway, someone sees through her bullshit and reaches out to her and is like, hey, we've got, like, 3 little witch bitches up in this castle, and it'd be really cool if you could come and train them in Witchy Pursuits. And because Mika, out of the goodness of her heart, wants to like meet more fellow witches, she decides she's gonna come. And the like caretakers of these 3 young girls are mixed in their acceptance and like excitement to have Mika there. And so she is mostly dealing with this like bitchy dude who's like in his 30s, I think. They fall in love and whatever. My issue with this book is that it was peddled to me as a romance. It is sold as a romance, and it is not that. It is nothing of the sort, I don't think. The hero of this book is just such a fucking asshole that I didn't want to read about it, frankly. And I'm very sick of this whole like enemies to lovers thing where the hero has no reason to dislike the heroine and is just insufferably rude to her for absolutely no reason. It just does not feel fun to read, and by the end of the book I was not sold on this man. Also, I'm gonna put a spoiler warning right here in case you want to read this book, but tell me why this man was basically hiding the fact that these little girls, their guardian, was just dead on the fucking property. Like, what sort of horror movie bullshit is this? Oh boy, I hated this book, and I'm not doing a good job at really doing it justice, but I gave this book 2 stars. Frankly, I think it deserves 1, but I'm just gonna leave it at 2 because I think that objectively there are a bunch of people out there who like this book and could like this book. I don't think it was like the worst thing I've ever read, but it was very much not for me. I'm not into that, like, again, sort of like literary take on romance. Like, I don't like it. It's not for me. Moving on. All right, next up we have Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead. What a throwback. I mean, I feel like this video in general is just kind of full of the throwbacks, but it's very interesting, I guess, to see just how much our tastes change over the years. I loved this book when I read it back in like 2008. And I really enjoyed it again when I read it in 2018. And I remember reading it and thinking like, wow, this actually holds up. It's not problematic. Like, this book is great. Why don't more people talk about this? And then I read it in 2024 and I realized, oh, there were definitely problematic things I missed upon rereading. It's just interesting to see like how our tastes and the things we pick up on evolve and change over time, that a book that I could have read just a few years ago, like I could have different feelings on. I don't know. I think it's interesting. That being said, I still love this book. I still think this book is a whole lot of fun. It's about our main character, Rose, who is a dhampir, which is like half vampire, half human. And their job, their duty as a species is to protect the Moroi, or the good vampires, from anybody that like wants to cause them harm. Primarily the Strigoi, the bad vampires, who have true immortality and who like feast and kill, I guess, other Morois, and like are just like bad and evil and have like no, I guess, like conscience. And this first book is about how Rose and her best friend Lissa kind of come to be at this vampire academy and like why they escaped it in the first place. And it's just a lot of fun. It is like such a romp. It is everything I feel like that reminds me of the sort of like early 2000s. There's something about vampires that I think will always do it for me. And I think it's kind of the same with like Divergent. If that was like your first experience with YA, was like the Hunger Games and Divergent and all of the spin-off kind of books of that day, I think you have such a fondness for them. And I think for me, just anything vampire related, I have such a fondness for. And I'm very sad. Hayden and I really intended to make our podcast this year for vampire related stuff, and I'm hoping we can do that later on. But I guess I can throw this in here. It's kind of a weird place to put this, but if you don't follow me on my vlog channel, or I don't know, maybe you're just kind of out of the loop, I have been kind of sick recently and have been dealing with some like health struggles, and I haven't been able to like commit and make as many like fun things over my vlog channel or here. And so I like don't want to take on my podcast right at this moment when I'm not able to like actually sit down and film things consistently. But God, I love vampires. I just really do. And I just love that fucking book. I think I gave it 5 stars again upon reread, or like 4 stars, because it's just such a fun setup for a world, and it just like makes you want to read all the other books in the series. So I don't know if like it would be the best book to pick up in 2024 if you haven't read it before, but I also think of like a lot of the vampire books that came out at that time, it does hold up. So anyway, moving on to one of 2 books that I read this month that were 1 stars. And I don't hand out 1 stars often unless a book is like offensive to me personally. Okay, so What Lies Beyond the Veil is a romantasy novel, and I didn't know what to expect going into this book because I had not really heard much about it, but I was reading it for a video that's coming later in the month and I needed to get through it, so I listened to the audiobook, and this was one of the most unpleasant reading experiences I've had in a long time. So it's about our main character Estrella, who is basically just a fucktoy for this like rich lord who lives in the town that she's in. He's like kind of the protector, I guess, or like that's what he is claiming to be, I suppose. And he doesn't actually have sex with her, but he does frequently sexually and domestically just abuse this girl because I guess she doesn't have a dad around and he thinks he can get away with this. And I guess you can use that to contrast with like how someone's life is going to be in the future, but I don't think the contrast was done well here. Let me explain. So Estrella's living in this town. The idea is that this rich lord is protecting her and everybody else in the town from the Fae. They're on the other side of the veil, and to kind of like, I guess, strengthen the bond of the veil, they sacrifice someone every year. Her dad got sacrificed a couple of years ago. I think her mom is ill, and so like no one is just really like looking out for Estrella except for kind of her brother. Eventually the veil kind of falls down and Estrella is left trying to kind of run away from these Fae who are on this like great hunt, I guess. And so she runs away with her brother, and then they also meet this guy named like Callum or something like that along the way. And the guy is a creep. He is supposed to be, I believe, the love interest, the savior of this woman, and he is a fucking creep. She is just trying to stay alive and stay away from the Fae, and he is constantly talking about how like, when I get in those creamy shorts of yours, like I'm gonna just and it just does not feel right in the context. Like, it's like one of my biggest pet peeves I think about romantasy is that I think you can marry romance and fantasy for sure, but I don't think that you necessarily need to do it all at once. Like, if there's a life or death situation, if we're in a war camp, Sarah J. Maas, we don't need to have boning down. I think mayhaps we can like wait until a calmer moment in the book, just like a time when it makes more sense, when we are more emotionally and intimately connected. I don't know. I just feel like there were too many times in this book where I was just scratching my head like, what the fuck is going on? And also like the heroine's not receptive to his advances. She's not like, oh, he's kind of sexy. She's like, ew, what the fuck is this guy doing? And that is not a sexy hero make to me. So I gave this book 1 star. Have no interest in continuing on with the series. Let's not make that a trend. You know what I mean? Let's just not do it. Next up, a nonfiction book, switching gears a little bit. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I picked this up again for a video that I'm doing in a few months. I think in June is when I'm doing this video, because I have to plan my list of videos in advance. I gotta give myself some time to read. This one is a really popular book, and I think I went into this one expecting it to be something completely different than it was, and I was like kind of pleasantly surprised, and I also kind of read it at the right time, but I can also acknowledge that this book definitely has flaws. So the idea and the overarching theme of this book is not to not care what other people think of you, you, which is kind of what I thought that it was going to be. But instead, it's a book about how to stop caring about the things that like don't matter and that like ultimately won't mean much in your life, right? Basically trying to say that anxiety is pointless because it is having you be scared about things that like might not actually happen, and that you should only focus on what you can control in life. And like, I don't know, some of the messages of this book I think were useful and helpful, but I think maybe a little bit too simplistic, especially considering that this is coming from like a seemingly wealthy white man. Some of his, I guess, takes could be a little reductive and or missing the greater point of life. Like there are reasons to worry sometimes, you know, that's normal. I don't know. I think if you need this kind of message, you're someone who is just in, I don't know, a hard place or like dealing with anxiety, I think this could go one of two ways. Like it could either be very helpful for you and keep you grounded, or it could make you feel like, why are you invalidating my feelings? So it's like hard to recommend a book like this, I think. I think self-help books in general are just challenging to review and to recommend, but I thought it was fine, I guess, ultimately. I don't know what I'd rate it. I don't typically rate nonfiction. I'd say maybe like 2 or 3 stars. Like it was fine, but like, do you need to read it? No. All right, next up. I feel like I could go my whole life without reading another book about World War II. I really do. Not that it's not an important time, but why do authors just seem so fixated on World War II? Okay, Things We Leave Unfinished by Rebecca Yarros. Another book that I'm reading for a video. I don't even know what the fuck to say about this book. This kind of felt like The Notebook, but like with a really heavy emphasis on World War II. So we've got Scarlett and Georgia. Scarlett is Georgia's grandmother. She is a pilot, I believe, in England, and she is a badass, and she meets this guy and she falls in love, and it's like about her love story in part. And then in modern day, Georgia is finding her grandmother's like writings, and she wants someone, specifically this guy that she ends up in a romantic relationship with, to, I guess, cobble together her grandmother's writings and make a book, like a romance basically, about her grandmother's great love story with her grandfather. But she doesn't actually want it to be a romance. Like, I don't think she wants it to have a romantic ending, because that's not actually how the story ends or something like that. And so the book is basically about her, Georgia, that is, collaborating with this guy who she doesn't trust and who she doesn't really want to write her grandma's story, but like kind of needs to write her grandma's story. I don't know. Kind of fighting it out while this guy's trying to just like do his job. And then, you know, obviously concurrently, simultaneously, we're getting Scarlett's story and like about her falling in love and like the tragedy of her life. I think my thing is that I'm just like sick of tragedy. I'm sick of stories about World War II. I just think it tends to be romanticized as this like time when women could do anything and like women were at the forefront, and like, you know, there is something to be said, I guess, about the accomplishments of real life women during World War II, but I just like didn't really need this account of it. I felt like, I don't know, if I want to read about World War II, I'd rather just read like actual accounts rather than fiction. I don't know. I just don't tend to connect with Rebecca Yarros' stories either. I think that her writing tends to be a little melodramatic, and the romances tend to they just don't connect with me. I don't know. All right, next, I'm gonna breeze through this one because I don't remember much of it, which I feel like says all you need to know about the Casanova by T.L. Swan. I have not had great luck with this author in the past. I think it's been pretty evident in my talk about, I think it's The Takeover, which is one of my least favorite books of all time. This book's about Kate and Elliot. Elliot is the CEO or whatever of this company. He's a billionaire, of course. We all know how I feel about billionaire romances. And Kate works for him, and I guess she had some like tragedy in her family a little while ago, so she like dresses pretty frumpy and is kind of bitchy, and she's trying to kind of overcome both of these things and also like get out more. And so she gets on this dating app, and she ends up meeting Elliot on the dating app, and I think she knows who he is and then he doesn't know who she is, or vice versa. I can't remember which. I didn't like their interactions in real life. I didn't like their interactions on the app. It felt disingenuous. It felt weird and fake and just like not like something that would happen in real life, which is weird because I've read this setup in other books and I have not felt the same way. So I think it's just something about this author's writing. It just does not connect with me or work for me. And unfortunately as well, the audiobook for this book, oh boy, I hate to be that person, but the narrator for the British heroine, I don't think she's British. We'll leave it at that, okay? I gave this book 2 stars. Another book that I'm sad to say that I gave 2 stars was The Nanny by Lana Ferguson. This is the first book that I've read by this author, and I actually really enjoyed The Fake Mate, which is a book that I read later on in the month, and I already have a vlog on that, so if you want to go like look on my channel, you can see my thoughts and feelings on that naughty book. But The Nanny is about Cassie and Aiden. Aiden is a chef. He hires Cassie to be a nanny for him, for sure, for his like 10-year-old daughter, and we learn a little bit more about Cassie's past. She used to be on OnlyFans, and apparently Aiden was one of her subscribers, and she figures that out over the course of working for him, and she keeps this from him, and that's like the main conflict of the story. I don't think that's a spoiler to say, because like in the synopsis of the book it does say that she was like on OnlyFans. I just feel like the thing that I've noticed with Lana Ferguson books is that she does a really good job with her setups. I love the banter and the connection between hero and heroine for the first 50% of the book. And then I notice whenever they tend to get physical in the biblical sense, or maybe not biblical, I don't really think there's anything biblical about the way that the characters have sex in her books. I just feel like the relationship development kind of falls apart a little bit, and the conflicts tend to feel a little bit out of nowhere, which is disappointing because I feel like if she could stick the landing for the conflict and also continue the relationship development with the sex, like her books would be slam dunks for me, like every time. But this one, again, it just kind of like starts falling apart, and they start doing some like sort of unwise things. I feel like at the beginning of the book, Cassie is a great nanny, and then once she starts sleeping with Aiden and sneaking around with him, like some of her behavior I just feel like is not the best when you've got a young person involved, you know, like someone who would maybe be very confused if she like caught you with her dad. I don't know. It was fine. It was 2 stars. I hate to just continue on the trend of the 2 stars. We're just like 2 star in, 2 star in, 2 star in. But don't worry, the next book we're talking about is not a 2 star. The Lily of Floodgate Hill is a 2 star read, obviously. It's about Anne and Felix. It's a historical romance that I read for, you guessed it, a video. This is a newer release. I haven't really read other books by this author, so I don't know like if this is just kind of a thing she does, but the idea behind this book is that like Felix has kind of had a thing for Anne in the past, Anne kind of had a thing for Felix in the past, and this book is basically just about the misunderstandings that went on between them to draw them apart, I guess. And the way that the author sets this up and writes this is just not exciting, and I feel like I'm doing a shit job at describing it. I'm probably doing a shit job in this video in general. I feel like my brain is just kind of addled, again, because I have not been feeling very well. But I didn't like this book, and I gave it 2 stars. So let's talk about the worst book that I've read in a long time. Maybe the worst book, not the worst book that I've ever read, but it's up there. It's definitely on that hallowed list of books that I just like can't believe got written. The Ritual by Chantal Tessier. I talked ad nauseum in a vlog about this book, a couple of vlogs actually, but like I just need to talk about it here for posterity, right? This book's about our 2 main characters, Riot and Blakely. Riot is a part of a secret society at this like really rich college he goes to called the Lords, and all the letters in Lords stand for something like loyalty, order, shit like that. And the secret society is very interesting, right? You're a freshman, sophomore, and junior year. You are not allowed to have sex with anyone, and you are supposed to do whatever your seniors tell you to do, which is basically kill people. That's what you're doing. You're killing people, doing really shady shit. And then your senior year, you get gifted a chosen, which is a woman who will fulfill your every need, and she's assigned to you, and she has little to no say in whether she becomes a chosen. Like, you kind of convince her that you want her to be your steady slam piece, but like she doesn't really get on the list by her own choice or volition, right? And Blakely is actually dating someone else at the beginning of the book. She finds out pretty quickly that he's a piece of shit, and so she does kind of a 180, and she's like, you know what? Even though I didn't initially want to be your chosen, Riot, because I have a boyfriend, my boyfriend's a piece of shit, I've dumped him, and instead I need your hot beef injection. And so she signs up to get beefed on the regular by Mr. Riot. She doesn't know what she's signing up for, let's just say that. There's dubious consent, non-consent for sure in this book. Some of it is consensual non-consent. Our heroine definitely has fantasies about non-consent situations, and so her and the hero kind of like talk about it, and then they kind of act out these situations and scenarios, but that happens like later on in the book. At the beginning of the book, there's definitely situations where like she's drunk and incapacitated, and he kind of takes advantage of that. All of that is interesting for sure. Definitely things that you may or may not want to read about. I think dubcon and non-con is one thing. I think throwing away someone's contraception and replacing it with placebo pills, I think is another level of fucking crazy. The things that happen in this book are just out of this world fucking nuts. You know, at the beginning of the book I was like, this is fucking weird, and like, you know, this would never happen in real life, and like it's stupid. But the more that it goes on, the more I'm just like, she was really just thinking about every weird scenario she could think of. You know, we're gonna like cut off some people's fingers together, you know, we're gonna like fuck in a pile of blood. Like, I don't know, I just, call me old-fashioned, but like these are just not situations that I want to read about or like I find romantic or sexy or even fun. It does have me interested though, and like y'all let me know in the comments down below if I should read Butcher and Blackbird or something like that. I don't know, that one I've heard is interesting. This however was not. It was not interesting. It was not fun. It was laughable and bad. And if you have read this book, I would love to know your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, because I know some of y'all feel the same way. Okay, now a book that I have talked about in another video, this could be the last book that I talk about, is the best book that I read this month, and I wanted to talk about it again here because I've talked about a lot of shit that I did not like. I just talked about a book that is one of my worst of the year, so I have to talk about one of my best of the year because I didn't want to leave you in the lurch. This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan was so fucking good that I'm gonna sing it from the rooftops, and this is a book that I'll never get sick of talking about. Okay, this book's about our 2 main characters, Soledad and Judah. Soledad is going through sort of a tumultuous time in her life at the beginning of this book. She feels very betrayed by her husband, who has given her 3 beautiful daughters. She is very unsure of where she wants to go next in her life. I don't think it's a spoiler, honestly, to say that she goes through a divorce in this book, and she is trying to kind of figure herself out and what it means to kind of be a single woman, to devote yourself to figuring yourself out. She feels like she's been really lost in motherhood for a while and in taking care of this man, and now she gets to kind of live her life, but also she's discovering that like this guy is waiting in the wings for her, this amazing, incredible guy, and like how does she kind of reconcile those two things? Her being independent, but also finding this guy who's actually really incredible and wants to just watch her shine. Oh boy. I'm really reaching for books like this more and more often lately, and I want to read more books like this. I never thought that I would be someone who would lean more into the women's fiction side of things, but I think I'm just getting so burnt out on the same old, you know, the like smut, the repeated sex scenes with like no character development, and like, I like sex. I do. I really do. I don't even mind reading in books. I like reading in books if it's done well. The sex scenes in this book I thought were scorchingly hot, and I think it's because of the relationship development that happens. Like, you need to establish a presence between these two characters, establish a chemistry for me to feel anything when I'm reading these sex scenes. Otherwise, it's just like, wow, a penis goes in a vagina. It feels clinical almost when you don't have the relationship development behind it. And I just think Kennedy Ryan does such a fucking awesome job at writing books, and I want to read more books from her in the future, obviously, and then also just like more books like this. So I guess what I am asking from y'all in the comments down below is to let me know, again, if you've read The Ritual and what you thought of that, and also let me know what books have really blown you away recently, romance or otherwise, that made you feel something, because I feel like lacking books that make me feel things. A lot of the books that I read in March made me feel kind of meh or not good, and there were very few that really just like blew me away, and I need more of that going forward. I think March was kind of a slumpy month for me, so I'm excited to get back into the swing of things in April. It is actually like April 8th, I think, when I'm filming this, and I have not read a single book or finished a single book, so I'm feeling Slump City and I need some help. So let me know in the comments down below, again, like what you think has been an incredible book this year. Maybe I'll get to it this month. But thanks so much for watching. Sorry this wasn't more thrilling. That just is kind of my life right now, again, as I'm dealing with health issues, but love you all so much. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.